At the end of Willow Street in Salem, Massachusetts, there stood an old gray house that most people in the neighborhood avoided. The paint on the walls had peeled away over the years. The wooden fence leaned slightly to one side, and tall weeds had grown wild in the front yard. The windows were often closed, and the porch light flickered faintly at night. Children in the neighborhood whispered stories about the house. Some said it was haunted. Others believed a strange old woman lived inside who never spoke to anyone. The truth, however, was very different. Inside that house lived an elderly woman named Dorothy Hayes. Dorothy was 86 years old. Her hair was white and thin, and she moved slowly with the help of a walking stick. Although she had lived in the house for nearly 40 years, most of the neighbors barely knew her. She rarely came outside except to check her mailbox or water the plants on her porch. Because she kept to herself, people began to imagine things about her. Rumors spread easily. Children ran past the house quickly. Teenagers dared each other to walk up the porch steps at night, but none of them ever knocked on the door. One autumn evening, a powerful storm arrived in the town. Dark clouds covered the sky, and strong winds shook the trees. Rain poured down heavily, and thunder echoed through the streets. Around 8 o'clock that night, the entire neighborhood suddenly lost electricity. The houses became dark. Streetlights turned off. People inside their homes began searching for candles and flashlights. The storm continued to grow stronger. In one house across the street, a young mother named Laura sat nervously in the darkness with her 2 small children. Her youngest child had a fever and was crying loudly. Laura tried to calm him, but without electricity, the house felt cold and frightening. Then she noticed something unusual. Across the street, the old gray house still had a light glowing in one of the windows. Confused, Laura looked again. Yes, there was definitely a light. She wrapped a blanket around her child and decided to take a chance. Carefully stepping through the rain, Laura walked across the street and approached the old house. The porch creaked beneath her feet as she knocked on the door. For a moment there was silence. Then the door slowly opened. Standing there was Dorothy Hayes. Her face looked gentle, but slightly surprised. "Yes?" Dorothy asked. Laura spoke quickly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but my child has a fever, and our power went out. I noticed you still have light." Dorothy looked at the child in Laura's arms and immediately opened the door wider. "Please come inside." Laura stepped into the house and looked around in surprise. The inside of the house was nothing like the outside. It was warm, clean, and filled with soft yellow light from several lanterns. A small generator hummed quietly in the corner of the room. "Sit down," Dorothy said kindly. She brought a warm blanket and gently placed it around the child. Then she checked his temperature with a small thermometer. "You've done the right thing," Dorothy said calmly. "The fever isn't too high yet." Laura looked relieved. "Thank you so much." But that night, Laura was not the only neighbor who noticed the light in Dorothy's house. One by one, they knocked on the door. Dorothy welcomed them all. Inside, people found candles, blankets, hot tea, and a warm place to sit while waiting for the storm to pass. The children who once feared the house now sat on the floor playing board games that Dorothy had kept in a wooden cabinet. The adults talked quietly while rain pounded against the windows. Someone finally asked the question everyone had wondered about for years. "Mrs. Hayes," a neighbor said, "why do you have a generator and all these supplies?" Dorothy smiled gently. "Well," she said, "many years ago I worked as a nurse during several large storms. I saw how quickly emergencies can happen." She looked around at the room filled with neighbors. "So I decided that if another storm ever came, I would be ready to help." The room became very quiet. For years, people had avoided Dorothy's house because they believed strange rumors. But in reality, she had quietly prepared to help them all along. Hours later, the storm finally passed. Electricity slowly returned to the neighborhood. One by one, the neighbors thanked Dorothy before leaving her house. But something had changed. The next morning, children walking to school waved at Dorothy as they passed her yard. Neighbors began stopping by to say hello. Some even helped repair the broken fence and clear the weeds in her garden. Within a few weeks, the old gray house no longer looked abandoned. Flowers began to grow in the front yard. The fence stood straight again. And every evening, the porch light glowed warmly. Sometimes, the things people fear the most are simply the things they never took the time to understand. And sometimes, behind the quietest doors, there are the kindest hearts waiting to help.